My first memory was when I was a very small child and I didn't understand what was going on. I realized we were in church, but I didn't realize, couldn't understand what was going on. I must have been maybe 4 or 5 years old. And then we were coming home from church. We were still living on the farm. We were coming home from church one Sunday, and I asked my older sister why we called the person reverend. And she said, well, we do that to all preachers. We call them reverend. I remember that. I still probably wasn't in first grade yet. It turns out that they call me reverend, too. The one who had the most influence on me, I'm not sure that it was the first initial believing in God, but who had the most influence on me when I was a young teenager. My pastor in Fargo, North Dakota, we moved into the city then in Toronto, and he was such a strong influence. Great person. He had such an influence not only on me but on several of my friends in the congregation that it eventually led me to consider entering the ministry, which I did. That's the strongest influence that I had. And I can't really rule out my parents either, because they were insistent that we continue in Sunday school and church and the youth group and so on. So I guess they get equal credit. The dominant image that I have of God is spirit, because this is what Jesus says in the Bible. God is spirit, and we worship him in spirit and in truth. And so that being the case, I had long ago dismissed God being like a grandfatherly figure with a beard.
Right. He's not one of your contemporaries.
No, he's not just a larger person. I have to think of the image of God. I have to think of creation. That I profoundly believe that God created, and to think of the galaxies and all of the whole universe created by God is awesome. This is absolutely awesome. That God still has an interest in you and in me and in individuals. It's a mystery, but I think that word describes God more than anything. Well, when I have a vegetable garden, and it helps me.
Okay.
I don't use it as proof, but I know it as the growth. I think whether it's human growth or vegetable or plant growth, I think is one of the great miracles of the universe and of the earth in particular. And I cannot conceive that growth could take place if there were not a God who created growth and created us. Normally when people ask me that, I say, well, there are about 300 passages that are my favorite. But I tend towards the Gospel of John, because he is so theologically oriented, the writer of that Gospel is, and I might not be the word, but I relate to the deep discussions that that Gospel gets into, and then from there I go to the Apostle Paul and his writings, and how he is gets so deep in creating an early theology of the Christian faith.
Is there any one thing that just sort of springs to mind from Paul in that regard?
Yeah, I think when he says in the second chapter of Ephesians that we are saved by grace through faith and not through our own works. That's just so helpful for me, because it eliminates the possibility that we're saved by doing nice things. Not for an athletic event because I wasn't a jock. But I think when I got serious about the ministry, and before I was even in seminary, my pastor, whom I so admired, had asked me to preach a couple of times at my home church. And that required some prayer because I knew all the people were sitting there and they saw me grow up, with getting into mischief and all that stuff. And there I was standing in the pulpit. And yes, I prayed for strength and guidance, and I still do. That perhaps has become more mature in my praying, but that I still do pray for guidance. I don't pray and then tell God what the result should be, but pray that God will bring to fruition what I should have according to God's desire.
How often would you say that you pray per day? I mean, I've read where some people talk about being in constant prayer, through every kind of waking moment.
Yeah, I'm not at that point, but I do have prayer every morning before, shortly after I get up. And try to keep in mind people who are in need, people who have difficulties and so on.